Coalition forces have finally hacked the C3 networks of the Word of Blake and made their force dispositions known. Will a quick thrust end this conflict, or will it drag on? It's the closure of the Word of Blake campaign, and we are rolling in with a conventional detachment with a Preda A with a Word of Blake Mane Domini pilot, and rolling in with extra support is a mercenary detachment ran by Fatbird. Spearheading the coalition forces is a Tarian detachment, complete with the usual assortment from Defler, and a rather eclectic use of small light mechs. We don't know what they are. And since this is a twofer, Hunter has brought in a traditional assortment of Word of Blake units, holding the Northern Highlands and keeping the approaches safe, while Memphis Mark takes on the Coalition detachment to take them on. Again, we lose either of these games, and it is completely out and out for the Word of Blake. We are again fighting for a draw. We need at least one win here to completely draw it, or if we can draw both games, we can at least guarantee another game, right? In this engagement, we are going to try to play the field. We've got the Vedette Rack tanks holding the center, while we got a rifleman that will escort the tanks up the middle of the map. The Goblin IFVs are going to actually go through the city, hoping to gather as much interest as we can into the center section of the board, and then use some of the buildings to help control some of the lanes of fire, and then swing into the opening later on. Let's see if that works. Meanwhile, as a diversionary element, we have the Preda holding on some Longinus armor, or Phalanx armor, and it's leaping down south, while we got the assault mechs doing their traditional role of holding the center. If it wasn't for those beefy merc units, we might have some troubles for the Word of Blake. And already it looks like it's paying dividends, as the coalition forces are actually spread rather thin. They put a lot of their units wide. They're not even contesting the city for the most part, allowing the IFVs and the riflemen to move up the center, while the assault mechs move along the center of the map with the racks. I really do love that Preda model. It's very fast, it can get around the board really quickly, and that medium laser arrangement makes it a very versatile and deadly foe. Now, it's important to point out that the coalition forces have used their sprites to hold a fire support platform along the center, but they're actually really slow. They're moving up right behind the buildings, and as an LRM platform, I would love to be able to engage them closely, but we're going to see if we can try to do that. Immediately, we move the IFVs forward on the first tick that we have, and we move them in such a way that we can start spreading, or at least showing our hands, that we might be able to divert one way or the other. We're going to keep the heavier assets a little bit further back in our initiative track, except for the slower heavies moving along the center. It's pretty obvious which direction that they're going to go, so they thunder forward, holding the center and making their immense presence known. And as the formations begin flattening out and engaging each other, the skirmishing elements scream away from the others and start opening up flanks, skirmishing the sides, trying to open up a different avenue of attack. And as they do, the Tarians send their Locust out there to try to open it up, and we respond by having the Preda fly off the hill line and then send its infantry out there into the trees nearby. We're going to engage the Locusts with the Preda and hopefully take a killing, while they move their Harasser hovercraft way wide. They've got a huge flank and just about everything that they could hope for out there if they're looking for an open range. Rack tanks move forward, they're holding the center, and they are in a nice position. From there, they're able to actually tag just about anything. They are controlling the center, and if they end up becoming a mobility kill and becoming a turret or a bunker, then they're still got a lot of targets. They're very, very threatening from that position. So they spool up, they take the shots that they can, but there's not a whole lot that Rack 5 can actually hit. Not this turn, with the tanks flanking and everybody else around them moving as fast as they are. The Word of Blake LRM carrier parks himself and starts taking shots downrange. I do believe he tags one of the clan mechs, but it actually is of no worthwhile damage. With the Word of Blake assigning quite a bit of firepower along the center and swinging through the city almost uncontested, there is now a asymmetric amount of firepower on the Word of Blake's favor. There's not a whole lot of coalition forces that are able to respond to them because they're spread wider, way wider than what the Word of Blake forces are. This is a fairly fortuitous tactical move. We have got the initiative. If we can only hold on to it, we might actually be able to pull out a win for the Word of Blake. Just let's hope on the Northern Highlands that Hunter can pull out a win as well. And do you know this mech? It's from an XTRO. It's the only mech that's known in the clan inventory for killing the technician before it ever killed anyone else. It's fast, it's got decent enough armor for what it does, but it has no offensive capability whatsoever. It's a combined arms unit, and for that reason, you will never see it in the clan inventory. And for that reason alone, it is a hilarious insight into clan culture. Beginning of turn 3, once again, the coalition lost the initiative. They've been losing the initiative every turn, and they have also lost the tactical grip on the field, as now their skirmishing elements are swinging through the lines of the Word of Blake. There's not a whole lot we can do to stop them directly. Our skirmishing units are actually a lot slower. Actually, it's pretty much left to just the Preda. But we're not going to let that slow us down. They've got an inferior amount of forces out there, and we're going to use the asymmetric capabilities of our forces to be able to hammer them down. As they begin moving the Warhammer into the open to take on the Orion and the Marauder, it's already looking a little bit dicey for him as they are singling him out. We start moving all our units in such a way that we are going to capitalize on this mistake of moving the Warhammer out into the open, and we're going to put as much as we can while the Preta rushes back to stop the Locust from taking on the LRM carrier or any of the rear areas of all the tanks. And as we move into the fire phase, the cluster of Sprite LRM boats, if you want to call them that, are actually very effective in the role. There's a lot of them to put down. They move quickly enough. They're really a niche LRM unit that the clans really need, and they're awesome in the role of LRM support, and they manage to do a whole lot of insignificant damage. They splash the Vedette carriers, or at least the ones with the slowest to hit mod, but it actually doesn't do any kind of consistent damage. The Vedettes, however, had stopped this turn because we're in the position that we need. We turn around, we find our target, pan the turret, spool up the rack, and wouldn't you know it, the first one jams! This is the first decent shot it had, and it jammed. So I go ahead and spool up the next one, and wouldn't you know it, it also does not jam, but it rolls a 4. It's just right close to it, and table chucking shenanigans were afoot as I chucked the dice at poor Defiler over and over and over again because he just couldn't let it go. He just had to bait it on. Hey, 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 don't jam the gun, don't jam the gun, don't jam the gun. Almost jammed the gun. Man, I wanted to kick the mess out of him. There's some proto-mechs moving through the city as well, trying to take on the Goblin IFVs, but they're not presenting themselves a target, so not a whole lot is going on in the city while the Rifleman takes desperate shots at whatever he can see. But still, the rack jammed, and that really ticked me off. So we go ahead and house roll it, because it's really aggravating when that happens, that the crew can dismount and clear the jam. Normally you can't do that in Battletech, so we just house rolled it as a 5-man infantry team that is considered prone in the open whenever they try to clear the jam. It's going to be fun. Preda, despite all its assets, actually doesn't manage to do a whole lot. He keeps whiffing a lot of his shots at the Locust. Meanwhile, on the northern end, Hunter is having a go of it. The Centurion is cowering under the combined weight of the C3 network And the Legacy just decking out mech after mech. On the Highlands, it is looking good. Things are going great for the Word of Blake, and it looks like we might actually pull off a double win. Keep your fingers crossed, because we are putting in as much effort as we can to hopefully get a win out of this campaign. Try to snatch some kind of mediocre victory from the jaws of almost certain defeat. It's the beginning of turn 4, and the Warhammer falls over the turn prior under the combined weight of 2 assault mechs. It gets back up, pulls itself back into a more defensible position, while the Toro and other clan assets begin to try to shore up the deficit in firepower. Meanwhile, we move the assault mechs forward. We're not going to let him go as they close into short range as the Warhammer backpedals as fast as it can. And as it does, we pull the riflemen out of the city because our gambit has been played. We're going to move them back along the center into the open, and we're going to let them cover the the rack tanks out there so that we can keep the momentum coming. Tarian skirmishing elements still make a mess of everything as they rush forward to engage the vedette tanks that are now desperately trying to clear a jammed rack, while the other vedette tank with a working gun starts reconsidering his situations. Goblin IFVs pull out there, try to protect themselves with the buildings, and try to lay it in onto the Locust. Meanwhile, a Protomech moves forward, the Procyon, I do believe, and he starts leveling his guns at the crew that is dismounting the tank to try to clear it. The Vedette, his buddy, backs off the target. He's not going to stick around there, and he's going to try to get a back shot on that Locust. The Warhammer's taking it on the chin, however, as the Tarian unit begins moving back, backpedaling as fast as it can. It is losing armor section after armor section as the Marauder and Orion is actually just devastating everything that it can hit. And it's just melting off, slag after slag of armor as it just piles up on the ground. Meanwhile, a Drillson has moved forward to try to cover the exit, try to open up some holes in the Marauder, but we're not having anything of it. Even though the Preda can't quite keep up with that blisteringly fast Locust, the Preda is going to engage the Drillson instead. If we can't shoot at one, might as well pick the other, right? Vedette tanks manage to actually not hit much of anything, and the Procyon manages to kill all of the infantry that exited their tank in the middle of a war zone, and it naturally ends just as about as you expect. Infantry in the open do not live that long in this game, much less ones that have prone mods. But hey, clear the gun for the Word of Blake. This is your duty. We'll just replace them with a bunch of iPads, because otherwise the tank is just fine. And despite the valiant efforts of the Warhammer pilot, he goes down again under the combined fire from the 2 assault mechs. It was a brave effort to try to clear the jam on that rack while it was in the middle of an active war zone, but nonetheless, nobody survived it. LRM Carrier continues to spam out the targets that he can get, even though that Locust is danger close. We managed to not hit it with nearly anything. We shot a lot at that Locust, but it manages to completely evade its own mortal coil. And those Sprite LRMs are actually really nice. You need a small, light clan unit to fit the LRM boat role. I can't see a unit that will do it better than those. It's the beginning of turn 5, and the Tarians are almost down an assault mech. He gets back up, but he has got significant damage. Toro swings wide, tries to open up a flank against the Marauder to at least try to take some pressure off of it. Preta engages, moving into the open, trying to at least distract the Toro or take on the Drillson, while the IFVs begin moving forward, making their presence known in the center, and again protecting the downed crew and taking on the Procyon and other units in the center. There's a significant lack of actual tangible force in the center board for the coalition forces. If they cannot repel the Word of Blake assault, they are going to have some trouble, and just as they do, they leap in the Crimson Languor from across the board. He's right there, right where he needed, and that's a desperate time for the clan mechs. Again, we decide to go ahead and pan our attentions back over to that thing because we just darn near forgot about it. But thankfully, the rifleman is right there to take care of business as the coalition reestablishes their line and starts falling back. And as they do, as the tempo has been completely changed on this board and the coalition forces are trying to revitalize their efforts, I get word that on the northern slopes, we've got a problem. It appears that the legacy that was being ran by Hunter actually took 2 hits, a gyro and an engine hit, and is under a fusillade of fire. It's almost destroyed, making the valiant effort from the Word of Blake forces down here almost null. Warhammer goes down again. He can't seem to stay up to save his life as the other assault units begin pummeling it to death. It appears that nothing they could have done could have saved it. Even the Rack Vedette managed to flank it just to get his movement mod and get out there and kill it. The Drillson managed to immobilize itself the turn prior. Again, it's a juicy target to shoot, but we just got too many things to shoot at this turn. We managed to tag it with some long-range shots from things that had nothing better to do, but unfortunately, even the LRM carrier is being tied up by that locust that we couldn't put down a few turns before and is now ran over there and has started lighting up the LRM carrier. As much as it is a decent boat, it doesn't have armor to its name to stop this. We begin focusing fire on the Crimson Languor, hitting it over and over and over again from the different IFVs in the rack, and we managed the rack rifleman, and we managed to put it down, giving it internal structure damage and completely taking a leg off, if memory serves, and causing the pilot to eject. He'll get it out and leave. The Toro manages to take it on the chin from a couple different sources, and the entire coalition force is actually in quite dire straits. And as we learn this, we learn that the Northern Highlands was lost, leaving the campaign a loss for the Word of Blake. It turns out that just as soon as the legacy was lost, the rest of the forces on the Northern Highlands actually folded against the front of Memphis Mark's impressive collection of Christian Crusher's mechs. So we take a look at the field, we analyze where it could have gone, and despite the impressive showing from the Word of Blake, we were actually pretty dinged up on a lot of fronts. We were running out of ammo on some units, other units got quite a bit of damage. We lost the LRM carrier, and our position was a little bit damaged, but we rationalized it as a strategic withdrawal because we had the initiative against them. The sprites couldn't keep up with us, and that was the thing that we were really going to go after and try to kill, and they couldn't keep up with us. That's all it boiled down to. So if we were role-playing this, we would have turned around, licked our wounds, and withdrawn. And because the Northern Highlands were lost, we would have just withdrawn straight to the dropships, making this a tactical victory for the Word of Blake, but a strategic loss in the campaign. This has been an Ouchies Batrep. Thanks for watching. There's also an element of time to consider. We were running the clock out on this one, and we could have had it. I really think that we had the ability. We could have moved forward and just crushed those sprite mechs. All they really had to stop us was a Toro. But we didn't have enough time, and the campaign was already lost.